Newman joins us for another important conversation. You think that the worst things going on in the public schools would be in the progressive states? Think again, Mom and Dad. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show. We are the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. But before we start, I want to take a moment to invite any business owners out there that would like to support our program through advertising to email us. The Dr. Duke Show reaches tens of thousands of like-minded people every day, hundreds of thousands occasionally, and we could be a great partner to help promote your business. Simply email media@fpeusa.org. That's media@fpeusa.org to get the conversation started. All right, Katie is kicking things off with a look at the health of our republic.
I wish I could say it was pumpkin spice and all things nice, but that's not what we have today. Instead, we have the failing ladies of the fall who are interjecting all over the place instead of leaving like we'd hoped them to do. Especially this one.
Keep government open. We have to do those imminently, more imminently even to address the full Obama agenda of building back better.
I'm sorry. Who is president? Do you know where you are right now, Nancy? And more importantly, did you take some of Joe's pills again? Now that leads to today's question. Who do you think is on the rest of the list I'm about to reveal? I'm curious to see who you think is helping make us a land of the farce. And one more thing, if you could share this video, it helps show that not every lady wants us to turn into a failing fantasy land once called America. And since I am a lady, despite what some of you have said in the comments, I'm not going to use a different F word, but you know what I mean. So, who else made the list? You already know who's number one, because after all, she's the greatest of all representatives of all the people. The one, and thankfully the only, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As you remember from a hot second ago, AOC was fighting injustice on our behalf.
And we asked, what does it mean to be two working class women showing up to the Met? And so we decided that we're going to do it. And this is the message. Tax the rich.
Yes, the Met Gala, as you remember, was when AOC fought injustice by going to an event that cost $30,000 per person, while also wearing a dress that said, tax the rich.
How dare you?
You and everyone else have no right to assume that AOC had any ulterior motives. She was there fighting for all of you, but you right-wingers just don't understand. And so AOC had to take precious time out of her weekend to go on Instagram to explain it.
So, I'm hearing some folks, especially the right wing, having this critique about Monday saying, isn't it ironic that she showed up in a tax the rich dress? And I think we need to go back to literary class a little bit.
Literary class. It's like English class, but not, because English is racist.
Now, the definition of irony is the use of words that mean the opposite of what you really think, especially in order to be funny. That's not the opposite of what I think. We need to tax the rich, and we need to confront this establishment and this concentration of wealth that likes to consider or market itself as liberal or progressive, but wants to do absolutely nothing to address wealth inequality, and oftentimes lobbies to protect laws, including in the Democratic Party, to preserve the establishment of their class interest.
Well, we clearly understand more about this situation than she does, but she put that on Instagram, so don't you question her. Just laugh instead, because it gets better. After the Met Gala, AOC and her team decided to make hay while the sun shines and promote the bleep out of the Tax the Rich collection of clothing they sell on their campaign website. They launched the collection back in December when I promptly heartily laughed at it. And now, Team AOC says whether the message is on a sweatshirt or something more formal, the facts are the same. In order to reshape our economy and make it work for all of us, not just those who can self-fund their trips to space, we absolutely must tax the rich. Just give them $58 for a sweatshirt or $27 for a t-shirt. The fit is unisex, I'm sure, in the name of equity. And And just know that Team AOC said 100% of proceeds help fund Team AOC's critical grassroots organizing and campaigning for policies like this one. But AOC knows what irony means, and you don't. And so does Aurora James, the dress designer.
Well, the Met Gala obviously is one of the most exclusive events in the world, and we wanted to come and deliver a message. And I think when we talk about inclusion and gaining access to closed rooms for people of color, when you finally get a seat at the table, you have to decide what the message is that you want to deliver. And I think for the Congresswoman, I think for myself, economic equality and economic justice was sort of top of mind, and tax the rich was really what we settled on.
That makes perfect dollars and cents. It's all about the economic justice for James. Except, she owes $2,500 in delinquent property taxes on the $1.6 million mansion she purchased in Los Angeles in September of 2020. And, she owes about $15,000 in income taxes, and she owes more than $103,000 in federal liens. So, yeah. And yet, James found $2,700 to donate to Hillary Clinton for her primary efforts in 2016. So she has a history of picking failing women. That brings us to the next failing farce of today, Hillary Clinton, because she won't go away. She had to take it overseas because no one wants her here. Clinton was officially inaugurated and installed as the first female chancellor at Queen's University of Belfast. She let her social media know to call her Madam Chancellor, because you definitely aren't going to call her Madam President. Being a university chancellor is the closest she will get to being inaugurated for anything of a leadership position. All figurehead, no action. I just can't believe that they let Greta Thunberg off of her boat to carry the tails of the robe for Clinton.
How dare you?
Oh, Greta, making more appearances. On the note of universities, I must make mention of another couple of girls, if, of course, they identify as such, so you can be reminded how bad our education system has gotten and how the universities are mostly indoctrination camps. At Arizona State University, these two students decided to approach and verbally assault two male students simply for studying in the multicultural space on campus.
This is the violence that ASU does, and this is the type of people that they protect, okay? This white man thinks he can take up our space, and this is why we need a multicultural space, because they think they can get away with this shit.
I assume these young ladies took their camera technique from AOC, who found herself the perfect spot to pull a crying stunt this week when voting on the funding of the Iron Dome in Israel. As you can see, AOC positioned herself right where the camera was taping and was able to get those crocodile tears in the shot. End scene. And end scene for the ladies of The View. Yes, I didn't know they were still on the air either, but two of them, well, those two weren't, because two of them tested positive for the thing we can't say its name without being canceled. So that thing that is Ovid C. Well, Joy Behar let everyone know that it'll be okay.
Since this is going to be a major news story any minute now, what happened is that Sonny and Anna both apparently tested positive for COVID. No matter how hard we try, these things happen. They probably have a breakthrough case, and they'll be okay, I'm sure, because they're both vaccinated up the wazoo, a lot of vaccines.
Oh, okay. The best part is that the vice president was in the studio and was supposed to be interviewed by all of them. What a close call, right? But that at least answered the question for that day of... Where in the world is Kama-Lama-Lama Ding Dong? You see, because she's not at the border, she is only supposed to be in charge of handling the border crisis. Instead, Jensaki is out there trying to defend the indefensible, getting sassy pants with muck like this.
You say the border is not open, but we're told by our teams on the ground, you guys are releasing pretty much all family units, couples where the woman says that she is pregnant, or single women who say that they are pregnant, and that nobody actually has to take a pregnancy test unless they want to. So
are you suggesting you don't believe when women say they're pregnant? Is that a big issue, we think, at the border?
I am not in charge of keeping the border secured.
Do you think
guys are.
Pregnant women are posing a big threat to the border?
You tell me.
To the border communities? Is that a big issue?
You tell me.
I'm not aware of pregnant women being a big issue of concern to people at the border.
Her lippy attitude continued in trying to talk about the economy and the Democrats' $3.5 trillion plan, which according to Joe Biden is cost-free, but really only in his addled mind because it actually shows that taxes and consumer prices would rise for basically you and me. But Psaki is there to spin away or circle back, and so she sadly attempted.
Obviously, the president's commitment remains not raising taxes for anyone making less than $400,000 a year. There are some, and I'm not sure if this is the case in this report, who argue that in the past, companies have passed on these costs to consumers. I'm not sure if that's the argument being made in this report. We feel that that's unfair and absurd, and the American people would not stand for that.
I won't sit for it either, except for right now. I'm sitting now. I began with talking about pumpkin spice, so I figured we'd end on that clip of that gingery pumpkin spice. For the record, I don't like pumpkin spice. This past week was a lot of fiery females failing to see what was good for this country because they were too busy falling for themselves, and it was quite the farce to watch. That's why I hope you share this video for all to see. Until next time, stay healthy, America.
Joined now by our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much, Duke.
Another great Newman report today about how it's not just in liberal states, but predictably it's also especially in conservative states that radical LGBTQ, radical sexuality education is being pushed on our kids. So even in states where you've got Republican governments, Republican legislatures, they're doubling down the public schools in teaching this progressive garbage.
Yes, they are. And you know, you and I both, Duke, for years and years and years as we've traveled this great country. You know, when we go to New York, California, Illinois, you know, the parents there already kind of realized what's going on. But in South Carolina and Oklahoma and Idaho and things, oh, that doesn't happen here. Well, we now have concrete proof that it does. So the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, and the Lieutenant Governor of Idaho, Janice McGeachin, they put together these task forces to examine what was going on in the public schools. And predictably, they found exactly what you and I have been saying they would find. Marxist indoctrination, hyper-racialism, critical race theory, gender confusion. In fact, in North Carolina, they found one of the books that was being given to these children, for little children, promoted the idea that boys should be taking hormones so that they can, in the future, mutilate their genitals and become their true selves and impersonate a female. So in North Carolina, they got over 500 submissions, including from teachers, by the way, who are horrified about this and they're scared to speak out. But folks, I don't care if you live in the most conservative district in the most conservative state. This filth, this perversion, this brainwashing is happening. It's happening now. It's happening in your local government brainwash camp. I don't care if your Aunt Sally works there or whatever. This is ubiquitous, and these two reports prove it.
Well, it's actually targeted for conservative districts. Let's not be, I mean, there's very few school districts in California where you're going to have to convince progressives that this is not true, right? So this may be originating in places like California or Massachusetts or New Jersey or Virginia, but it is not meant for those schools, right? This is especially targeting so-called backward rural people in this country, backward suburban moms in this country, right? Those places where the remnants of patriotism, love of country, love of God remain, those places where family is valued in ways way beyond what you see in these huge metropolises. And so let's be very clear about this. It's not an accident. The real question, Alex, why is it that Republican legislatures generally, Republican governors, seem to be paralyzed in terms of what they can do? You're in Florida. Give us a quick overview of how DeSantis is doing this and why the DeSantis method doesn't seem to be catching on in other states.
Yeah, well, DeSantis has tried really hard to pull this garbage out of our schools. And in fact, he used executive orders to do some of it. And then he actually went to the legislature and said, look, we need to put this into state law. A recent example, our state legislature banned critical race theory in the indoctrination centers. And our governor signed the bill, and he was very actively promoting this. He said the CRT, this racist garbage, has no place in taxpayer-funded schools. And yet, Duke, every school district in this state is still teaching critical race theory, and that's a fact. We have people who've gone through the textbooks, and all the new textbooks they just bought are filled with this crazy racist trash. So the problem is, even when the legislators try to do the right thing, in North Carolina, the legislature just passed a bill banning critical race theory. In Idaho, they passed a bill banning critical race theory. But what has happened here is these schools see themselves as above the political fray. They don't have to worry about what the politicians or the taxpayers or the parents think. They're going to do whatever they want. And what they want is to brainwash and dumb down and radicalize and sexualize your children. And they're going to do it, whether the state legislature passes a law, whether the governor passes an executive order. We had the same thing here with face diapers, right? Our governor issued an executive order saying no school district was allowed to force children to put these ridiculous diapers on their face. And a bunch of our biggest school districts did it anyways. And the clown car Biden administration came in and said, hey, don't worry about DeSantis. If he cuts your salary, we'll just come in and we'll make it all up for you from the stimulus package that we passed for the COVID relief. So it's completely out of control. And this is what I've been telling parents. You can get all the state laws passed you want. You can get all the school boards to ban CRT. They're going to keep doing it to your kids. It's that simple. Until you pull them out, this trash is going to keep happening.
Well, we warned you. We warned you for a long time on the show. You and I have been across the country. This now is what the federal takeover of education looks like. You can no longer pretend, as so many activists did, so many progressives did for the last 10 years, that this is not the feds taking over. The feds are not getting in. Now the feds own it, right? What happened in Florida is a classic example. Ignore what your state governor says. This progressive Biden administration will make it all right. After the break, let's talk about some of the consequences of the federal takeover of education. Back now with Alex Newman for the second part of our chat on what's going on in the public schools. Conservative states seeing an influx of all this radical political education into the schools. Doesn't seem like much that can be done in a state like yours, where you have a world-class governor who's did everything almost legislatively he can to keep this garbage out of Florida schools. The Biden administration comes in and says, "Oh, don't worry about it. However DeSantis punishes you or censors you or fines you, we'll make it up." So here we are in the era now where the federal government really does control American public education, so much so that you said at the end of the last segment, the schools don't care. They don't care what you think. They don't care how many moms show up and scream and yell. They don't care what kind of negative publicity they get. They have their back is being completely covered by the Department of Education, by the Biden administration. There's always a federal judge. You can find some Obama appointee who's willing to let this stuff go. So again, moms and dads have no say in what's going on. And before the show, you and I were talking, Terry McAuliffe, failed Obama apparatchik, is now running on the Democrat ticket for governor of Virginia. He said just yesterday, Alex, in a debate, that American mothers and fathers should have no say about what goes on in the public schools, period.
And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
And that's the status quo. American parents have no say in what happens in these indoctrination centers. Don't believe me? Go to your local school board meeting. Try to ask them, right? You have no say whatsoever. They don't care what you say. In fact, they enjoy rubbing your nose in the fact that they're teaching this filth to your children and that there's nothing you can do about it. And adding insult to injury, this clown show called the Biden administration is now investigating state governments for civil rights violations if they don't force the children to put the diapers on their face, if they don't do what the Biden administration says. So, we should stop with the pretense that we have local school districts that are going to be controlled at the local level, that the community has some input. It's absolute baloney. It's a farce. And actually, if you look carefully at the Biden administration, it was funny, Nancy Pelosi just yesterday said, we have to implement the the Biden agenda.
Keep government open. We have to do those imminently, more imminently even, to address the full Obama agenda of building back better.
They really came out of the closet during the Obama years. In fact, their Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan, repeatedly said that he was working hand in glove with the United Nations to globalize education, not just in the United States, but around the world, to turn your children into green global citizens. They're forcing this UN propaganda on the kids. Again, it's all over the nation. And, you know, I wish parents well who think they're going to run for school board and fix everything. But the reality is this is way too far gone. You're not going to fix anything. And so I like one of the recommendations that the task force in Idaho came up with. They're talking about now we need education savings accounts for parents. You should not have to fund your own children's education in a good Christian school or homeschool, and then also fund on top of that the brainwashing and the radicalization of other people's children. It's time for that to stop. What I like about the ESAs is that this money never goes to the government, right? Because the government, they're hoping that we'll say, oh, yeah, let's have tax money for homeschoolers. Let's have tax money for Christian schools, because then they think that's how they're going to control them. But if we can do it so that the money never goes to the government, it just goes straight from the parent to the education, that's the way to do it. And Idaho has this now as a serious recommendation from this task force, and I hope many, many more states will work on this as well.
Well, the one question that remains to be begged is, and I think even beyond the fact that we want parents to be able to spend their money on alternative education without it ever going to the government, is this question. So if people like Terry McAuliffe actually believe this is the position of Biden and the entire progressive government, is that moms and dads have no say in what goes on in the public schools, then why should we be paying for it at all? If you're telling us that you're on the one hand, you're mandating attendance at these schools, on the other hand, you're telling us we have to pay for them and we have no say in them, then we need to break the system up altogether, right? Get rid of any mandatory paying for the public schools and only require payment from those families who use the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just imagine this guy in Virginia with a German accent. We will decide what your children will learn, okay? And no questions shall be asked. That's the attitude that these people have. And if that's the attitude they want to take, fine. You keep your crummy school system that's brainwashing and dumbing down the kids. Look at their own test scores, right? Not even a third of the children from these institutions are proficient. See how long these things last without compulsory taking of money from people who want nothing to do with it. The whole thing will collapse tomorrow, Duke.
It would, it could, no evidence is going to. It's going to take even before we can get to that far, we're going to have to completely elect different kinds of politicians. So moms and dads, there's only one safe option right now, and that's out of the public schools. Alex Newman, thank you again. Another very necessary Newman Report. It's time for some real education. We have been celebrating the words, the novels of Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian, incredibly apocalyptic author. He's somebody who understood what was coming. He recognized in the writings of people like Marx and Nietzsche that individuality was about to be destroyed in Russia, that the coming Soviet socialist takeover, socialism itself, was going to drive the church underground. It was going to destroy freedom and liberty, and he was exactly right about that. And so we've been talking about how Dostoevsky in his novels tells stories to get across his ideas. There's a wonderful anecdote from the end of the Brothers Karamazov about an atheist and what happened to an atheist when he died. I'm just going to read it to you. It's a little longer, but it's very powerful. There was, they say, a certain thinker and philosopher here on earth who rejected all laws and conscious faith, and above all, the future life, the afterlife. He died and thought he'd go straight into darkness and death. But no, there was the future life before him regardless. He was amazed and indignant. This, he said, goes against my convictions. So for that, he was sentenced to walk in darkness a quadrillion kilometers. Yes, we also use kilometers now. And once he finished that quadrillion, the doors of paradise would be finally opened to him, and he would be forgiven everything. Well, so this man sentenced to the quadrillion stood a while, looked, and then lay down across the road. I don't want to go. I refuse to go on principle. He lay there for nearly 1,000 years. And then got up and started walking. The moment the doors of paradise were opened and he went in, before he had even been there 2 seconds, and that by the watch. Before he had even been there 2 seconds, he exclaimed that those 2 seconds of heaven would be worth walking not just a quadrillion kilometers, but a quadrillion raised to the quadrillionth power. In short, he sang Hosanna and overdid it so much that some people there of a nobler cast of mind did not even want to shake hands with him at first. He jumped over to the conservatives a bit too precipitously. This is the Russian character. And by the way, if you get to read the novel, that particular story about the reluctant atheist, think about it. Go ahead, lay down for 1,000 years. Lay down for 1,000 years. Sooner or later, your only choice is to walk, and to walk toward God. Now, interestingly, that anecdote in the Brothers Karamazov, it was actually told by the devil himself. Interesting. All right, just a quick reminder that the best way to access all of our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store and get access to 18 new programs a week, plus all of our award-winning lectures and animations. And did I mention it's free? Now we want to take a moment to show some love to our Patriot Club members. Today, we give a shout out to Waylon from Magnolia, Texas. Waylon, that's a great Texas name. I bet you got a great voice for singing, too. Thanks for supporting us. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. And until next time, always choose Waylon over Willie.